My name is Chris Shelton, and I'm a former Scientologist, second-generation Scientologist, which means I grew up in Scientology and was part of it for 27 years before I escaped. My parents got involved with Scientology when I was about 3 or 4 years old. They had gotten divorced, and I was being shuttled between them. And my father did communications class, and that was how he got involved in Scientology. And he dragged my mom down there, and they ended up getting back together. My parents worked for the church through the 1970s while I was growing up and going to school. I started working for the church right out of high school. The principles of Scientology have to do with people are immortal spiritual beings who will live forever and have lived in past lives. The accumulated trauma of all those past lives affects us in the here and now. And I was raised to believe that this is a true thing. And I thought that I was never going to die, for example. The belief set also includes the idea that there is a subconscious mind that is always active, that is sort of working against you. And they call this the reactive mind. If I was ever acting up or having a discipline problem or something like that, it was always referred to stop using my reactive mind or stop being banky, as they would say. Scientology also has an extensive ethics and justice system, a sort of internal justice system, which is used on its members. And so my parents used it with me growing up as a child. And some of the disciplinary actions are sitting and staring at somebody else. My brother and I would be sat down and made to do these drills where we'd have to sort of stare at each other for 15, 20, 30 minutes at a shot without blinking or moving. And it set me apart from other kids because I couldn't really talk to them the same way that my parents were interacting with me. They believe that we are immortal spiritual beings who just inhabit bodies. This is not who we really are. Scientologists tend to treat children like they're adults. They consider that children are just adults in little bodies. And there are a lot of unreal expectations that are entered into the parent-child relationship because of that one idea. Children are disciplined like adults. They are talked to about sexual matters like adults. Sometimes in Scientology, there's even been sexual abuse because of this attitude with minors and adults. So it's bad when you mess up or do something really bad as a group member. There is what's called a condition that is assigned to you. You are called a liability. It's like a tag that's given to you, and you have to work through these steps to stop being a liability to the group. I would be told, in all seriousness, often by my dad, about how there were buildings and people not from Earth, different kind of people, living on Venus and living on Mars, and how there were stations there, like military stations and spaceships, and how they were keeping an eye on us here. And I would ask questions like, well, what do you mean by that? Well, tell me more. And my dad would say, well, I can't tell you anymore, or you'll get sick. And what do you mean I'm going to get sick? Well, according to L. Ron Hubbard, there's confidential information in Scientology that is so spiritually powerful that it could hurt you or even kill you if you find out about it before you're ready to learn about it. You have to be prepared for it with these earlier steps in Scientology that you're supposed to do first. And I was alight with this. Like, what do you mean? What's going on? Tell me more, right? Because I was fascinated by UFOs and stuff when I was a kid, but he wouldn't tell me anymore. So that was a part of growing up as well that always made me feel apart from other people, because I couldn't talk about this with anybody. I didn't know enough about it to be able to tell them or convince anybody else of anything. Was stuck to the mystery of it. What's going on Mars? And everything I could ever read in an encyclopedia said there was nobody on Mars. What are you talking about? That's impossible. The way that I got involved with Scientology was when I was about 15 years old. My dad suggested to me one day, kind of out of the blue, hey, why don't you go down to the local Church of Scientology? This was in California, and check it out for yourself. I did some classwork introducing me to Scientology principles and teaching me how to study. There's a whole class on how to study. And then I started learning actual, raw, real Scientology techniques for the auditing and the theories of the mind and the spirit and all of that, according to L. Ron Hubbard. I was getting ready to go to college, and I was going to be a writer and a teacher. And they down at the church said, hey, why don't you come work for us? And I was like, I don't think I want to do that. And they said, oh, no, you definitely definitely want to do that. And they spent about 5 days recruiting me. And they showed me a number of writings and quotes from L. Ron Hubbard about how this planet is on its way out and the civilization is doomed to failure and because of this reactive mind. And the only thing that's stopping the decline of civilization is Scientology. And I was primed to believe these things, having grown up in a Scientology family and been surrounded by Scientologists my entire life. All of my parents' friends were Scientologists. We didn't have non-Scientologists coming and hanging out on the weekends or partying with us. When they said you can come work for us and actually save the world, it took a few days, but they actually did convince me to do it. And I became a person on a mission. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to save the world. And I thought Scientology was the way to do it. We wouldn't have insane people anymore because Scientology says it can deal with that. I believed all of it. And I was 17 years old. I had no real life experience. The only job I'd had at this point was Burger King. So I went all in. I joined staff in Santa Barbara, California, and I worked for the church there for 8 years. Now, there was a lot that happened in the 8 years that I was there. Basically, it was volunteer work. I wasn't paid for it. I got maybe 20, 30 bucks a week. So I had to have another job that would pay my bills and put a roof over my head. So I had a full-time day job. And then I would go down to the church on nights and all weekend and work. And if I ever got time off during the day, I'd go work then too. So pretty much my life for 8 years was 2 full-time jobs. The priority in my life being the one that wasn't paying me or really supporting me in any way. I was supporting it. So I worked as a classroom teacher and I worked as an executive overseeing the delivery of the Scientology services at the church there in Santa Barbara. And they were a pretty small, struggling organization. The churches of Scientology don't refer to themselves as churches. They call themselves organizations, or they call themselves orgs. And so I worked at the org, and I made a little bit of progress in Scientology as far as the services of Scientology go. What you get for working for Scientology is you get free services. You don't really get money. There's a series of indoctrination steps that you go through, and you pay money for this. And the first big major step is called the state of clear. And I achieved that step as a staff member after about 6 years of being there. And it felt really good for a few days. It felt like this really adulated, amazing state of being, but it's a temporary high, like all of Scientology is. But after 8 years of working there, Scientology wasn't any bigger. I wasn't doing any better, and the world wasn't being saved. And I thought to myself, I'm 25 years old now. I've been doing this work really hard, but it's not going. And the people who are working here in Santa Barbara have been here for 20 or 30 years. They're not going anywhere, but they're not making this thing happen. We're not achieving our goals, let's say. So what I should do is I should double down on this, and I should join what's called the C organization. This is sort of the core fanatical body of hardcore full-time Scientologists who do nothing but Scientology 24/7, 365. And that was the group I went and joined. It would be like running off and joining a monastery or joining the Vatican or something. They feed you, they clothe you, you live on a base with other people who are in this outfit. And if you've ever heard of the billion-year contract, that's where it happens. The Sea Org is where you sign a billion-year contract of commitment to the Church of Scientology. Because you believe in the fact that you're an immortal spiritual being, you really believe you're putting down the next billion years, which is what I did. I sit here now saying that was a delusional headspace. I was completely whack, but that's what I did. I moved down to Los Angeles, and for the next 17 years, I worked in LA at those big blue buildings, which is called the Pacific Base. And the Sea Org is a paramilitary outfit. They have uniforms and ranks and ratings, and they, yes sir, no sir, how high sir, like that. That's how they conduct themselves. Hubbard was in the Navy, and he created his own little Navy. And we took ourselves very seriously. They are all people who, just like me, were on a mission, what they call clearing the planet. It comes from that state of clear where you supposedly no longer have your own reactive mind, this subconscious mind that's eating you up from the inside. You get clear of that. And the idea in Scientology is that we can get everybody to that place. Game over. The world is saved. Everybody will be sane and rational, and the world will be wonderful. The Sea Org is the group that takes care of managing Scientology, promoting and marketing Scientology, all the videos, all the promotional pieces, anything you see about Scientology was probably produced by the Sea Org. Problem is that Scientology doesn't work. And yet you're in a situation, in a group where it must work, where everybody believes that it does work. And the only reason it doesn't is because you're not doing it right. So you get this circular sort of thing where you're making yourself or you're making other people wrong all the time because they're not doing it right. And it just gets harder and harder and becomes more and more forceful. I say all of this because this is a common problem in Scientology that creates an awful lot of frustration, anxiety, and even depression in people because they keep forcing it to make it work, and it doesn't. We were always at each other's throats. We were always mad at each other. And yet you're in a group that is all about trying to be happy and how we have to have a spirit of play and how everything has to be uptone. It creates a very weird mindset. And over a long period of time, it really messes with your stability. It's too fast. And it creates a system up and down the Scientology command chain of neurotic craziness. And I did that for 8 years until I kind of burnt out and went a little I can't deal with this anymore. I was losing sleep. I wasn't eating. It was bad. And people around me were in the same condition. I actually survived on my job for 8 years. No one else in my unit lasted that long. And I just went out the back door one night around midnight. I was like, I can't take it anymore. And I wandered from Hollywood, where I was working, to downtown LA. I just walked down there, got some money out of the bank. I think I had like $100 in the bank. In the Sea Org, we were making $50 a week, by the way. That's how much they're paying us. So I didn't have money to like escape. I got the money I had out of the bank, walked over to Pasadena, where I grew up, and I crashed in a hotel for 3 days. I used all my money and I just crashed and I slept and kind of got my sanity back a little bit and kind of came to a little bit. I got married when I was in the Sea Org, so my wife was still there and I had taken off and nobody knew where I was. So I called them and went back after 3 days. I shouldn't have. I really should have just left, but I stuck with it and I was in a lot of trouble. So I was subject to an awful lot of disciplines, put under 24-hour watch. I had somebody following me everywhere. I was kind of stuck in a room being watched until they could sort out what to do with me. And they finally ended up putting me on another job. And so it took me about a month of doing some real hard physical labor and work and stuff to kind of show everybody that no, I'm good, I'm here. And then I got in trouble again. And I ended up spending 3 years on what was called the Rehabilitation Project Force, or the RPF. And this was the worst 3 years of my life. And it's sort of an internal re-education camp created by L. Ron Hubbard and using Hubbard's techniques to re-brainwash his members. Basically, you end up on the RPF. They are forcefully re-indoctrinating you. Scientology is a cult, and we acted like a cult. We acted like we knew better than everybody else about everything. There were people who had to threaten to commit suicide to get out of there because it's a prison thing. It's you're relegated there. You're sequestered away from the rest of everybody else. When you're on the RPF program, there's no holidays. There's no days off. You're never going home. If you're not going back to the room that you stay in with your spouse, you're sequestered away during the time that you're on this program. So you're not seeing or talking to anybody else who's not on the program. What happened was I was out on a fairly extended length project out in Twin Cities. And I was in the very unusual situation for the last few years that I was in the Sea Org of being by myself a lot of the time. I was helping people move locations to work. Like there would be somebody who lived in Washington and they were gonna go work at the church in Las Vegas. So I was assigned to go pack their house and move them and speed it up. Let's go. We want them there now. We want them working now. So you're gonna go out there and facilitate that and make that happen. That was some of the kind of work I was doing. It was unusual, but it was interesting and kind of fun because it was so different from the usual other stuff I was doing. And there was nobody yelling and screaming at me all day. I was just able to get on with the work. And so I was doing this logistics work out in the real world, and I was surrounded by the real world. And I started seeing some TV and some newspapers and some things. And I started being aware of the fact that there was a whole big wide world outside the sort of bubble world that I had been living in for 17, so many years up to now. So that started opening my eyes and making me think of things. And I was spending a lot of time driving around from state to state doing this kind of work. And it started becoming clearer and clearer to me everywhere I went, whether it was Seattle or Portland or Twin Cities or wherever, that all anybody was focused on and talking about and putting pressure on was making money. It was not about helping people or how many people did you help or how many people did we get back in. It was how much money are we making? Every day, it became a kind of a refrain of money, 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 money. And Scientology was always about money the whole time I was in, but never only about the money. And in the last couple of years that I was there, that was all that anybody was really ever pushing for, talking about from on high, coming down in terms of orders and push and directions that we were getting. And I didn't join Scientology or the Sea Org to make David Miscavige a rich guy. The clearer and clearer it got to me that this money thing was there, the less and less enthusiastic I was about Scientology because it wasn't about money and it never should have been. Then the final thing came. There was this other thread running through the entire experience of being a Scientology staff member. And that was that in almost all of my interactions with public, with people, whether they were Scientologists or people we were trying to get into Scientology, we had to lie to them. Somewhere along the line, lies were going to be told. If I was recruiting a person to join staff and work at the church, I would inevitably end up telling them, oh, you get days off. Oh, yeah, we're going to pay you. You're going to make money doing this, right? You just have to work hard and do this and do this. And it's all there. The potential is all there for you, right? Knowing full well these people were not going to get time off. We're not going to get paid. We're going to get lucky if they could get services while they were working for the church. The things that the church represents as what this experience is going to be is not what the experience is going to be. And I knew that from all the years that I had been doing it. But you always have to put that best foot forward and sell people on, being recruited or joining staff or whatever. One day, I'm walking down the hallway, figuring out what to do with myself. I realize as I'm writing my list of to-dos that every one of them involves telling lies to people. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't deny it, and I didn't want to. I called my mom. Now, my parents had gotten me into Scientology. They'd raised me with it. But in the time that I had been a staff member and a Sea Org member, they had left. And so they were there for me. And they had gotten divorced and remarried and, gotten on with their lives. But individually, they were both there for me. I called both of them and I was like, look, here's where I'm at. Here's what I'm thinking. And they were so great. I'm going to have your back. You're not going to be in the streets if you leave the Sea Org. We'll help you. I ended up getting called back to LA because they knew something was up with me. And I said, yeah, I want to leave. I don't want to be part of the Sea Org anymore. I don't want to argue about this. Just let me go. 9 months later, they finally let me go. It took that long to go through the process of jumping through all the hoops to officially leave. I didn't just escape one night. I wanted to keep doing Scientology. Otherwise, they would label me a suppressive person, which is a bad thing in Scientology, and they would disconnect me or disfellowship me or basically shun me and kick me out. I didn't want that. And they gave me their blessing and they said, okay, good, off you go. You're no longer in the Sea Org. We're going to let you go. And this was December 2012. They gave me $500 severance pay. So I went and rented a car and I drove up to Sacramento where my mom lived. And she was good to her word and she put me up. And I got my feet back on the ground and I started looking for work and figuring my life out. And then I got on the internet and everything changed. It took me about 3 or 4 months of almost daily diving into stories and learning slowly. I didn't want to accept it or believe it at first, and I wasn't looking for it right away. But there were things that I had questions about. And I knew that there were resources on the internet where I could find things out. As a Sea Org member, I did not have internet access. Most Sea Org members don't. And if you do have internet access, it's filtered. It's like the Chinese system. The Sea Org has programs they'll install or filters they'll install. So you're only able to access certain parts of the internet, and you'll never be able to watch the South Park episode or hear about Tom Cruise or hear about Xenu or look up any of the key stuff. They'll prevent you from doing that. Information control is a very powerful part of the Scientology operation. So when I started looking and getting answers to certain questions, more and more things were being recommended to me to see and watch. And I slowly started accepting that there were things about Scientology that I had not known about and had never been told the truth about. And there were things about L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, that I didn't know about. And in fact, I came to learn that the entire life story of that man was a fiction. His war record, his work in the university, his discoveries, his work with people about the mind and the reactive mind and all this psychology stuff, all of it was all built on lies. None of what Hubbard had said was true. And I saw the documents, I saw the university transcripts, I saw the war records, I saw the military records, I saw the legal documents. They're all out there to be seen, but when you're in Scientology, they keep that all away from you and prevent you from looking at it. I was shocked, the rage that I felt when I learned that L. Ron Hubbard had lied about his war record. And the reason this is important is because L. Ron Hubbard said that he was wounded in combat and had fixed himself using Dianetics. The original thing that started all of this was that claim. And he wasn't shy about it. He was very bold about his claims. He said he was wounded and crippled and blind, and his family abandoned him. And the only way he survived and got out of that was applying the Dianetics principles to himself. All lies. He was never injured in combat. He was never blind, lame, or crippled. And to learn this at 42 years old, after I've dedicated 25 years of my professional life to Scientology, where do you even begin to describe how you feel? I was leading a life where I was working for a Scientologist. I was in a romantic relationship with a Scientologist. I'd left the Sea Org and was divorcing my wife from the Sea Org. So I was starting this new relationship with a Scientologist in Minnesota. So here I am suddenly realizing I don't want to be a Scientologist anymore. And this is crazy. It's actually like nuts level stuff that I've dedicated my life to. Now I have to unhinge from that. I have to how do I extricate myself from all of this? I love these people. These are my friends, right? What do I do? And the only outlets that I had were anonymous message boards and comments, sections of blogs where people would talk about Scientology for real, and they would expose it and talk about the abuses, former members and former Sea Org members and people I even used to know who had left way before I did. I was reconnecting with some of them, but it was all super secret. I couldn't let any of this be known because if the church found out, I was going to get labeled and kicked out, and I didn't want that. And I ended up getting into a meeting with some Scientology Sea Org members who flew out to Minnesota to talk to me and straighten me out. And that didn't fly, really. And by the end of the year, I was declared a suppressive person, and I was kicked out of the church that I had dedicated 25 years of my professional life to, and all of my life to believing it. They very unceremoniously got rid of me. And so by December 2013, a year after I had left the Sea Org, I was leaving Scientology officially, and everybody I knew disconnected from me overnight, including my romantic partner, her whole family, all of it. I lost everything. But by that point, I knew enough of the truth of what it was really all about and what those people were being subjected to, the mind control and the thought reform and the abusive parts of the system of Scientology. That was starting to become more and more clear to me by this point. So I really felt it was more of a kind of relief when they actually officially kicked me out, and I was totally done and severed ties, and never again shall I go back into a Church of Scientology. And so at that point, all I wanted to do was share my story and share the information about Scientology that I knew and get it out there so no one else had to go through what I went through. And I got the word out there about what I had been through and what Scientology was about, and people wanted to hear more. And it kind of just started growing from there. And then I got the idea to write a book about Scientology and break it down for people and not tell my story, but actually break down what this is for people so they can read about it, learn about it, and know why they need to stay the hell away from it. Not just one person had a bad experience, but this is a system designed to mess you up. Scientology does not have your best interests at heart. It is a totalitarian control system. So it took me a while to learn all of that. And that process of recovery and growth and learning is what I've been documenting on my YouTube channel ever since. And it's been 11 years now, and it's been wonderful. It's been an absolute blast of an experience. I guess something I would like to say to folks out there is that there is life after these situations. If you know, people who've been involved in abusive relationships or cults or bad group situations or whatever, there is life after this. And it takes a lot of work, and recovery is not just, you know, a walk in the park. It takes your participation. But if you invest in yourself, the returns are unbelievable and so fulfilling. And so I guess in a way I needed to have all that happen to me so that I can learn, you know, the things that I've learned over the last 10 years and appreciate them and live a life that I think is so much more worth living now than when I was in the cult. So I guess I'd like to share that too.